Story 1. I worked with a guy whose wife was dying of liver failure. He ended up missing a lot of work to be there for her in the hospital and take care of the kids. The bosses told him they would work with him and not to worry about the time he was missing. Out of the blue, they fired him for missing too much work. They told us in a meeting and said we were going to have to pitch in and help with his work. I asked when his position would be replaced, and they told us there wasn't a plan for that at the moment, so the team would have to permanently step up. I quietly filled my car with my own things and sent an email over the weekend that I had been offered another job and would not be returning Monday. I was really happy to leave them short-staffed after what they did. Story 2. I had only been there 2 weeks. It was a summer job and I hated every second of it. I had already secured a new position, so I marched into my manager's office with my "I quit" speech prepared. It was "I quit." And before I could open my mouth, he said, "Oh, hey, I was going to talk to you and let you know I'm afraid we have to lay you off, but we'll pay you out the rest of the week. Sorry about that." I thanked him and wandered out with a big smile on my face. It was a terrible job, but the free extra week of pay made up for it, I guess. Story 3. My husband passed away on December 25th, 2017. I started working at Edward Jones Financial in March 2018. My boss was a woman in her late 40s, obsessed with Sex and the City and Lifetime and Hallmark romances. She was thrice divorced and had a really hectic dating life. She frequently would read us texts from her various boyfriends during lunch. One time she said to me, "You're so lucky to be widowed. I've been divorced 3 times and don't know if anyone ever loved me. At least you know you were loved." Quite frankly, I can answer that question for her if she really wants. It's kind of a no-brainer, but I digress. She wanted to try and fix my aversion to Christmas like in a Lifetime movie. She decided she could make me fall in love with the holiday again if she just forced maximum Christmas upon me. Mind you, this was the first anniversary of his death. This was fresh. This hurt, and quite frankly, it still hurts. She decided the way to make me regain my Christmas cheer would be to put me in charge of planning and hosting a client Christmas party. I talked to her multiple times about how I could not do this, how it would be mentally devastating to me, how I was filled with anxiety even thinking about it, and how I have a literal post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis. She did not care. She was convinced she could ghost of Christmas future my problems away and make me holly jolly again. So, instead of planning anything, I spent all of November and December applying for other jobs while claiming to be working on the party. I sent her lists of items I never ordered, invoice approvals for invoices I didn't end up putting through, and so on. The day the Christmas party was supposed to happen, I sent a Christmas card to the office with my resignation, blocked her on everything, and never went back. Merry Christmas, Linda. Story 4. I came 5 minutes before my shift and handed the accounting department my keys. I was the restaurant manager in a hotel. Prior to that, I had put in my vacation notice months ahead and got approved. A day before I was to leave for said vacation, the other manager was let go. The food and beverage director nonchalantly told me to rebook my trip and come in to cover the fired manager's shift. The look on his face that night. Story 5. Worked at a clothing store. Terrible experience. Saved up enough money to buy a leather jacket I wanted. Bought it during my break. Put it on. Walked out of the store. Never returned. Story 6. Worked in a restaurant next to a hotel. The hotel's waistline got clogged and spilled into our basement dining area. The owner got snow shovels to clean it up. Told the dining room that the restaurant smells because it is full of waste and walked out. Story 7. I went into work, and there were a couple of people standing by the door. It was locked. Weird. The operations manager showed up and tried to unlock it, but his key didn't work. He called the owner, and the owner said it's closed permanently and under the control of a bank. We all went and grabbed 6 a.m. beers. Quite abrupt. Story 8. I took a job under the pretense that I would be able to work from home 2 days a week. My commute consisted of a 20-minute ride to the train, a 45-minute to an hour train ride, and then hopping on a bus to the office for another 15 minutes. Doing that 3 days a week was tolerable, but 5 days a week was unbearable. I was told I could start working from home after my probationary period was up. This was right after the chief executive officer of the company mandated that everyone return to the office. The company had moved into a new office during lockdown, and it wasn't ready yet. My boss, who was also new to the company, was a nice guy, but there were things about him that were increasingly annoying. I worked in the information technology department, and we had a room separate from the rest of the office. His desk was right outside the office, and his thinking was that he would try to stop people from bothering us if he could. That was fine, but you also couldn't leave the room without being questioned as to where you were going. I need to take a bathroom break. Luis, he had this bad habit of stopping us when we were leaving for the day. He would always say he needed 2 minutes, which in reality was really 20 minutes. I would stress to him that there were only a few buses after 5, and my trains back home were limited after rush hour, so I kind of needed to leave at 5 unless it was an emergency. The kicker is the guy lived about an hour and a half away from work and didn't want to commute every day, so he rented an apartment down the street and went home to his wife on the weekends. I was consistently scrambling to make the last rush hour train back home. The thing that would really upset me was he would wait until 3 in the afternoon to tell me I needed to get something done before I left. Now I'm scrambling to get 20 desks set up so that I can leave on time. Why couldn't you have told me about this at 9 this morning? One day I came in early before he got there to do some work, and he told me he didn't want me there before him. Why not? He was such a control freak that he would stand over my shoulder and tell me how I wasn't doing something right because I wasn't doing it his way. There was another guy on the team who had been there for 6 months, and this was his second information technology job. He was a rookie in my eyes. I have been in information technology for 20 years. He treated the rookie like he had 20 years of experience and treated me like I was the rookie. So now the time comes for me to start working from home, and they tell me that we really can't work from home. They just tell employees that because they know people don't want to come in every day. So 5 days a week, a horrible commute, and a micromanaging manager who holds me hostage every day. The day he called me Mr. 5 o'clock for wanting to leave on time was the last straw. I got a call from a recruiter for a higher position job with more money, and I managed myself. I signed the offer letter and quit by email with no notice. Story 9. I used malicious compliance to train my Indian offshore replacements. I only showed them exactly what the boss explicitly asked for. After decades of experience, I demonstrated about 4 tasks I was responsible for, leaving the company with the chaos it deserved. Story 10. I worked for a small, unpleasant company. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they decided I was to work in the office alone and set up cameras pointed at my desk to monitor me. I wrote my resignation email and scheduled it to send at a random time during my lunch break, like 12:37. Before I left for lunch, I deleted everything I had ever written or done, all of my emails and all of the projects I was working on. If I had touched it, it was deleted. I left for lunch, put the office key in the mailbox, and never looked back. Story 11. Work wouldn't let me have time off for a Calculus 2 exam during my sophomore year of college. I walked into work the day of the exam after studying for about 7 hours the night before, handed my keys to the manager, who, 2 months later, was fired for stealing, and walked right out the door. Best decision I ever made. Story 12. I had applied for a leave of absence as my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer, and his children, including my parents, were in different parts of the world working and desperately seeking tickets to come back. I was the only adult kid around apart from my grandmother, who wasn't fully literate to make these decisions on the spot. I spent 3 days in the hospital until all the adults arrived, went back to the office exhausted, and had to catch up on all my previous work because I was being irresponsible while my boss would promptly log off at 5 o'clock for a game of volleyball in the office courtyard. I was fresh out of college, but something just felt wrong one day, and I simply booked a one-way ticket out of that place, took all my belongings, and left. I was without a job for 2 months. The Human Resources Department called me on my phone after 2 months asking me why I hadn't signed in. I explained all that happened, sent the chemotherapy and operation documents to them, and told them if they can't value human life, I don't want to work for them. They put me under a different manager, but I was never going to stay there anymore. Story 13. Had an argument, the final one of many, with my boss about unreasonable demands. I was told if I didn't like it, I knew what to do. So, I kicked off my boots, dropped my jacket and identification tags on the floor, walked in my socks to my locker, grabbed my trainers, phone, and keys and just walked out. I was in that job for 15 years. In the 9 years that have passed, nobody has lasted more than 11 months. I have been asked to come back 3 times. It would take Elon Musk level pay to go back. Then I could work a week and retire comfortably. Story 14. I said, "Good luck pulling the rest of these metal sheets up, you old grumpy man," then walked off. His name was Bart, if I remember correctly. He worked for Skyline Roofing in Calgary, Alberta. That man was an angry, old person and made me feel like I needed to quit something I really enjoyed learning and doing. I hope he either got fired or reflected on himself and worked out whatever he was dealing with all the time. He criticized how I ate my lunch even though I chew with my mouth closed for the record. But he'd find a way. Nothing was ever his fault. This was in 2011. Geez, I think it's time to let it go. That feels better. Story 15. I used to work for a small technology-based company that sold web advertising. I was hired to do online marketing, but the job morphed into supporting the sales team, network troubleshooting, server maintenance, and answering the phones when the receptionist was on break. I worked there for almost 2 years. The boss was, well, let's just say unpredictable. Plus, he was not nice to everyone who worked there. Not as much to me because I was the tech guy. He had to be nice to me because I could really mess with him, and he knew it. I went on holiday for a week one summer, and that's when everything went wrong. I still don't know why, but during my week off, I was locked out of everything. I had 2 or 3 remote access options to get into the office computers because our web servers would routinely go down due to hacking attempts. The only way to recover was to reboot the web servers. This would give time for the firewall on a separate server to deal with all the excess traffic. The evening before I was due to go back to work, I got an automated text that a server was down. So I went to log in to reboot it and my password wasn't working. No problem, I tried another computer, also didn't work. So I tried to log directly into the web server. Only 2 other people have that login. Also didn't work. So I phoned my backup, the person who was supposed to deal with this while I was off, no answer. Alright, so I texted the server manager. He lives in another city. And there was no response there either. Then I called my boss, also no answer. Strange, since they always answered. Of course, by now, I knew something was up, so I just said forget it, I'm not going back to work, and I relaunched the business I was working on before I went to work for him. Within my first month of starting my own business back up, I made more money than my last month working for him, and I've never looked back. I never did hear from him, no email, no call, no text asking where I was. I talked to other people who worked there, and they told me he told them I just didn't show up and that I wasn't answering his calls. So I, of course, told them what happened, and no one seemed surprised. To this day, I still don't know what set him off. But I do know something did. I have my theories. One is that he found my LinkedIn page that says I own and operate my own business, and even my business LinkedIn page. I just never bothered to change them or take them down. I think it was this because his wife had visited my profiles on LinkedIn during my week off. It wasn't entirely surprising. I was already planning on leaving anyway because things between him and me were getting very tense. The guy was just too unpredictable. He just beat me to it by a few weeks. The final straw for me was one day he took me and another guy into an empty office and reprimanded us for half an hour about something trivial before asking, "And do you think either of you can get another job anywhere?" To which I replied, "Yes, I will have another job the next day." He didn't like that response. I knew then that the end was near. I was locked out about 3 weeks later. Story 16. On my first day, I made it until break, spent the break in my car having extreme anxiety, and finished the shift. When I got home, I had a panic attack and then couldn't stop sobbing. My fiancé called and said I would not be coming back. Story 17. I was finishing up a major project, an operations center for a very high-tech business similar to NASA. I had done all the work, including meeting with contractors, cable layouts, equipment installations, loading software, and configuring hardware. I came in on a day off, and the manager was having a meeting with senior executives and hurried me out of the office, so I was suspicious, correctly as it turned out, that he was taking credit for my work. The last task was laying in several hundred Ethernet cables, and he wanted them color-coded by destination, whereas I preferred color coding by data type. My method was the industry standard and used at other company sites. I asked him why. If it was a matter of personal preference, his prevailed, to which he replied, "Because this is my project." I raised my eyebrows. If it was his project, what was I doing? I asked. "Helping me," he replied. At the end of my next day at work, I informed him that I was giving 2-day notice and wouldn't be returning. He was upset and said, "2 days isn't enough time. I need a minimum of 2 weeks. You misunderstand," I replied. "It's not 2-day notice. It's today notice. As in, my last day was today." Then I gathered my belongings and left. I had bought LAN connectors that were 3-piece, but he didn't know what the third piece was for and discarded the box. When he installed the LAN cables, all the equipment experienced strange, intermittent errors. When my roommate, who still worked there in another department, pointed out the mistake, he had to order new connectors, submit budget approval, admit the error, and reinstall all the terminations. A few months later, a friend who did background investigations informed me that my old manager was a convicted sex offender. I told my roommate, who still worked there, and he informed others. A security guard saw someone looking it up and notified human resources, who dismissed him immediately.